So there's this myth, well, I believe it's a myth, that the Tories won the 1983 general election because of the Falkland War. I don't buy it. The main reason I don't buy it is because Margaret Thatcher didn't want that war. She did everything she could to not have a war. Even when the so-called task force was halfway to the Falklands, she was still trying to pull out. She was still trying to make sure that there was no war. And everyone knew that. The only reason we went to that war was because of Michael Foot. Michael Foot shamed Margaret Thatcher into sending that military force to the Falklands. Michael Foot was a lifelong anti-fascist. He absolutely saw Galtieri and the junta in Argentina as a fascist regime, and he thought that it was morally the correct thing to do. Foot was a socialist, and he saw it as the duty of socialists to fight fascism. In a special sitting of the Commons on a Saturday, Michael Foot asked how the Argentinians had managed to invade the Falkland Islands without the government knowing, how this was the first thing we'd heard about it. He pointed out that the United Kingdom had a world-class diplomatic service, had, I think at that point, the second largest expenditure on defence in the world, a supposedly world-class intelligence service. So how was it that the first we knew about this invasion from Argentina was on the day of the invasion? He said that the military could be used for deterrence purposes, and pointed out that in, I think, 1978, a couple of years earlier anyway, during the Callahan government, Argentina had made similar noises about invasion, and the Callahan government had merely moved a few destroyers closer to the South Atlantic. And that had been enough to deter the Argentinians from invading at that point. So how was it that the Falklands had managed to be invaded so easily in 1981? He also made the point that the Argentinian government was fascist, that the people who lived on the Falkland Islands were British citizens, British subjects at the time, I think, and that the British government had a responsibility to protect them and make sure that they weren't being abused by a fascist regime, that they remained free. And he also pointed out that the Argentinian people probably would be better off without this government as well. I think this intervention did spur the Thatcher government into acting in a more prompt way than it was originally, or in a more aggressive way than it originally wanted to. So we can thank Foot to a large extent for the decision to send the military rather than Thatcher, who really didn't want to do that. And there was very little Margaret Thatcher could do after that not to send the task force. She still continued to try to stop that war happening. She did everything she could. She wanted to have a deal where the Falkland Islands were sort of governed cooperatively between Argentina and the UK, and that maybe after this 5-year period the Argentinians could take over completely. So people knew that in 1983. The other reason that I think that it wasn't the Falklands War is because Margaret Thatcher's vote, she
didn't significantly increase. In fact, it dropped after 1979. She actually, the Conservatives actually won fewer votes in 1983 compared to 1979, both in terms of vote share and in terms of absolute vote. So, yes, she did a little bit better than what the opinion polls were saying in around 1981, 1982, but the people who voted for her in 1983 were almost certainly the same people who voted for it in 1979, and there was certainly a reasonable number of people who voted for it in 1979 who didn't vote for it in 1983. So the Tories were doing less well.
So as we can see here, the Conservatives' popular vote didn't increase between 1979 and 1983. In fact, it dropped by around about 700,000, which I think is quite a substantial decrease. And we can see that their vote share went from 43.9 to 42.4. So you may argue reasonably convincingly that the Falklands War helped the Conservatives get back to or close to where they were in 1979. But you cannot claim that the Falklands War helped the Conservatives become more popular than they were in 1979, because clearly the Conservatives were less popular in 1983 than they had been in 1979.
So where was I? Yeah, who voted for the Tories in 1983? If you look at what happened in 1983, it's not who voted for the Tories that's important so much as who voted for the Lib Dems. The Labour vote collapsed. Hard to say why. Probably Michael Foot was quite left-wing. He wanted to leave the EU. He wanted to nuclear disarm. These were things that were not popular policies, and that didn't help. And of course we had an alliance between the Liberals and the SDP. I mean, the Labour Party split, I think 28 MPs left, and they went to form the SDP, and then the SDP very rapidly did a deal with the Liberal Party, as it was then, and formed an electoral alliance, which they called the SDP Liberal Alliance. Now that went on to become today what we call the Lib Dems. But this split in the Labour Party was instrumental. I mean, the SDP Liberal Alliance got 25% of the vote. I think they got something like 7 million votes, which was 3 million in addition to what they'd got in 1979. The Liberals had got in 1979, let's say. And those 3 million all came from Labour. Labour vote dropped by 3 million.
This is just to emphasise that although Labour lost about 3 million votes, those votes went predominantly to the SDP Liberal Alliance, which won 3.5 million extra votes. These votes that Labour lost, they didn't go to the Conservative Party. The big winners in terms of extra votes in 1983 were the Alliance, SDP Liberal Alliance, but the seats that they won, the number of seats they won, wasn't reflected by the big increase in the number of votes they won. The Conservatives benefited from a large number of new seats because this is how first past the post works.
So anyway, we have to imagine that if the 1983 election had been run through proportional representation, then the Conservative number of seats they won would have probably remained about the same, maybe gone down a little bit. Labour would have lost seats, and the Alliance would have gained a lot of seats. I mean, a lot of seats. But it was a first past the post election, and the thing about first past the post elections is that the biggest determining factor about who gets the most seats is the difference in vote share between the top party and the second party. So if that difference is small, for example, like in Theresa May's election in 2017, then the difference in seats between the two parties is small. Theresa May lost her majority, if we remember. If that difference is large, then the winning party wins a whole host of seats. So we can genuinely say that Margaret Thatcher's popularity did not go up between 1979 and 1983. Her huge, massive majority was not because she became more popular, it was because Labour became less popular. The Alliance was extremely popular compared to the Liberals before. But the Alliance's seat share wasn't representative of its vote share. And this is why Thatcher did well. So we can say that Thatcher's victory, Thatcher's landslide, wasn't due to her popularity, wasn't due to the Falklands War, wasn't due to people deciding they wanted to vote Tory. Fewer people voted Tory. It was entirely due to the fact that the Labour vote collapsed and the Alliance vote rose. And so when people say that, oh, this is due to the popularity of Thatcher due to the Falklands War, I just don't buy it, because she didn't get any more popular. Anyway, that's what I wanted to say on that issue.